A publicity photograph from 1954. A man stands against a white studio backdrop in an open collar shirt, arms crossed, looking directly into the camera with the kind of easy confidence that most men spend their entire lives trying to manufacture. He is 6 feet 4 inches tall, dark-haired, broad-shouldered. His jaw looks like it was drawn by someone who had been asked to define the word masculine. Universal Pictures distributed that photograph to every major magazine in America. The caption read, "Rock Hudson, Hollywood's most eligible bachelor." It was the most successful lie the studio system ever told. And the man in the photograph knew it. He had been living it since he was 22 years old. His name was Roy Scherer Jr. He was gay, and the most powerful talent agency in Hollywood had spent a decade building a version of him that the American public could consume without discomfort. What that construction cost Roy Scherer is a story the studio system spent 30 years making sure nobody told. Roy Scherer was born on November 17, 1925, in Winnetka, Illinois. His father left when he was 4 years old. His mother remarried a man named Wallace Fitzgerald, who adopted Roy and gave him a new surname. Roy Fitzgerald grew up in a house where affection was not given freely, and masculinity was enforced as a condition of survival. He was quiet, he loved movies, he was not good at school. After a brief stint in the Navy during the Second World War, he arrived in Los Angeles in 1946 with no money, no connections, and no clear plan. He was 20 years old. He drove a truck, he delivered mail, he worked as an airplane mechanic. And then he met Henry Willson. Henry Willson was the most powerful talent agent in Hollywood. He was also gay, which he managed with the particular care of a man who understood exactly what the industry he worked in would do to him if it ever became public. Willson had a gift that went beyond finding talent. He had a gift for manufacturing it. He took young men, most of them working class, most of them physically striking, most of them with no particular experience, and rebuilt them from the ground up. New names, new backstories, new images constructed specifically for what the studio system wanted to sell to the American public in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Which was, above all else, a certain kind of man. Tall, strong, uncomplicated, heterosexual in a way that required no examination. When Willson met Roy Fitzgerald, he saw the raw material immediately. The height, the jaw, the quality of stillness that the camera would translate into authority. He signed him immediately. Then he gave him a new name. Rock Hudson. Rock for solidity, Hudson for the river, a name that sounded like something carved rather than given. Roy Fitzgerald agreed to it because Roy Fitzgerald wanted to be in pictures and Henry Willson was the man who could put him there. He did not fully understand, at 22, what else he was agreeing to. Universal Pictures signed Rock Hudson in 1948. For the first 3 years, he was unremarkable. Small parts, background work, walk-ons in films that nobody remembered. His acting was stiff, his line delivery was wooden. The studio assigned him acting coaches who worked with him daily. He was not naturally talented. He was naturally something else. He was naturally magnetic in a way that the camera captured and the eye could not explain. Whatever it was that made audiences lean towards certain people on screen, Rock Hudson had it. By 1954, he had it in sufficient quantity that Universal put him in magnificent obsession opposite Jane Wyman. The film was a melodrama about a reckless playboy who accidentally blinds a widow and then rebuilds his life to become the surgeon who restores her sight. It was the kind of film that critics dismissed and audiences consumed by the millions. Rock Hudson became a star overnight. Fan mail arrived at Universal in quantities that required a dedicated department to manage. Almost all of it was from women. They wanted to know if he was single. They wanted to know his favorite color, his ideal woman, his plans for marriage and children. Henry Willson read the fan mail and understood exactly what it meant. It meant the lie had to become more sophisticated. The machinery of heterosexual performance that Willson constructed around Rock Hudson was not unusual for the studio era. It was standard practice. The studios understood that their product was not films, their product was stars, and stars were images as much as they were people. An image that did not conform to what the American public expected from its heroes was an image that could not be sold. What followed was a decade of managed fabrication. Rock Hudson was photographed on dates with actresses who understood the arrangement. He was quoted in fan magazines about his search for the right woman. He attended premieres with carefully selected female companions whose own publicists understood the exchange of services being performed. Photoplay magazine named him most eligible bachelor 3 years in a row. He gave interviews about his ideal woman. She was warm, she was intelligent, she loved the outdoors, she wanted children. He described a person who did not exist, and a future he would never have, and he did it with the ease of a man who had been performing this particular role for so long that the script had become automatic. Behind the script, Roy Scherer was living the life that Roy Scherer actually lived. In the circles where it was safe to be known, he was known. The Hollywood community of gay men who navigated the studio system understood exactly who Rock Hudson was. They had always known. In 1955, Henry Willson received information that changed everything. Confidential magazine, the most feared publication in Hollywood, was preparing to run a story. The story was about Rock Hudson. Confidential was not a gossip magazine in the soft sense. It was an extortion operation with a printing press. Its publisher, Robert Harrison, collected damaging information about celebrities and offered them a choice: pay us or we publish. The information Confidential had acquired about Rock Hudson was specific and documented. Willson went to the magazine's publishers. He made a deal. He would give them 2 other stories, 2 other clients whose secrets he would sacrifice to protect his most valuable asset. The names of those clients have been documented in accounts of this period. They were Rory Calhoun and Tab Hunter. Their stories ran in Confidential. Rock Hudson's story did not. Henry Willson had protected Rock Hudson by destroying 2 other men. Rock Hudson knew this. He lived with it. But Confidential magazine had created a problem that one deal could not permanently solve. The story existed. Other journalists knew it. Other publications were circling it. Willson had one solution. He had to give Rock Hudson a wife. Her name was Phyllis Gates. She was Willson's secretary. She was 27 years old. She was attractive, intelligent, and employed by the man who was about to ask her to participate in the arrangement of a lifetime. Whether Phyllis Gates fully understood what she was agreeing to when she began dating Rock Hudson in 1955 is something she addressed in her own memoir, published in 1987. She wrote that she had been in love with Rock Hudson. She wrote that she had not initially understood the full nature of what she was being asked to be. She wrote that by the time she understood it, she was already married to him. The wedding took place on November 9, 1955. It was covered by every major magazine in America. Photoplay ran a cover story. Hollywood's most eligible bachelor had finally found his woman. The fan mail shifted from asking when he would marry to congratulating him on his happiness. The lie had found its final form. Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates divorced 3 years later in 1958. The official reason was incompatibility. Phyllis Gates received a settlement. She received no public acknowledgement of what the marriage had actually been. She spent the rest of her life as a footnote to a story she had been central to. The 1960s were the peak of everything the studio system had built. Rock Hudson made Pillow Talk with Doris Day in 1959. The film was a romantic comedy about a man who shares a telephone party line with a woman and pretends to be someone he is not in order to win her affection. The irony was not lost on everyone involved. It made $42 million. Rock Hudson and Doris Day made 3 films together. They were among the highest-grossing films of the decade. The chemistry between them was genuine. They were genuinely fond of each other, genuinely funny together. The image of Rock Hudson as the ideal heterosexual American man was, by the early 1960s, one of the most successfully constructed and maintained fictions in the history of popular culture. It required constant maintenance. New relationships had to be manufactured. New stories had to be placed. New photographs had to be taken and distributed. Rock Hudson participated in all of it because the alternative was the end of everything. In private, Roy Scherer was living a different life. He had a partner, a man named Lee Garlington, who lived with him for years. He had a circle of friends who knew him as Roy rather than Rock. He had a life that existed entirely outside the manufactured image. But the manufactured image was total. It was in every magazine, every television appearance, every film poster. Roy Scherer could not walk into a restaurant without becoming Rock Hudson, could not give an interview without performing the character Henry Willson had created, could not answer a question about his personal life without consulting the script that had been keeping him alive professionally since 1948. He was 50 years old before he allowed himself a relationship that felt genuinely his own. His name was Mark Christian. He was 30 years old. They met in 1982. Rock Hudson was 56 years old and had spent 34 years performing a version of himself that had nothing to do with who he was. Mark Christian was the first person in decades with whom he did not have to perform. In June 1984, Rock Hudson went to his doctor. He had been losing weight. He was fatigued in ways that rest did not resolve. There were spots on his skin that had not been there before. His doctor ran tests. The diagnosis was AIDS. In 1984, an AIDS diagnosis was a death sentence. It was also, in the America of 1984, a social sentence. The disease had been identified 3 years earlier. It had been killing gay men in San Francisco and New York and Los Angeles for those 3 years. The Reagan administration had not said the word publicly. The mainstream press had covered it with the particular discomfort of institutions confronting something they would prefer not to name. Most Americans knew almost nothing about it. Rock Hudson knew everything. He kept the diagnosis secret. He continued working. He appeared on Dynasty in 1984 and 1985, playing a love interest for Linda Evans. In one scene, he kissed her on screen. He knew he had AIDS. He did not tell her. He did not tell the production. He did not tell anyone outside the smallest possible circle. Because telling anyone meant telling everyone. And telling everyone meant the end of the only life he had ever been permitted to have. On July 25, 1985, Rock Hudson appeared at a press conference in Paris with his friend Doris Day. He was gaunt. His face had changed in ways that photographs documented without explanation. The press asked about his health. His publicist said he was tired from travel. 2 days later, on July 30th, 1985, Rock Hudson's publicist issued a statement. Rock Hudson has acquired immune deficiency syndrome. The statement did not use the word gay. It did not need to. The American public understood immediately. The most carefully constructed heterosexual image in Hollywood history had been a fiction. The reaction was not uniform. Some people expressed sympathy. Some expressed betrayal, as though the man dying of AIDS in a Paris hotel room owed them a more honest performance. Ronald Reagan, who had been Rock Hudson's friend since the 1950s, who had attended parties at his house, who had watched his films and praised them publicly, issued no statement. The White House had still not said the word AIDS publicly. Rock Hudson's diagnosis forced the word into the mainstream in a way that 3 years of dying gay men in American cities had not. Rock Hudson died on October 2nd, 1985. He was 59 years old. He died in his home in Beverly Hills. He was alone. Mark Christian, the man he had loved for 3 years, the first person in decades with whom Roy Scherer had been genuinely himself, was not at his bedside. Their relationship had fractured under the weight of the secret. Christian had not been told about the AIDS diagnosis. He had learned about it the same way everyone else had, from the press conference in Paris. He sued Rock Hudson's estate. The case settled for $5.5 million. The man Rock Hudson had loved died as a plaintiff in a lawsuit against his estate. Henry Willson had died in 1978, broke and forgotten, the talent agency long dissolved. The clients he had built and sacrificed moved on to other managers and other lies. The studio system that had required the lie in the first place had been dismantling itself since the 1960s. None of that mattered to Roy Scherer. The lie had outlasted the system that created it. It had become its own structure, as load-bearing as any wall, impossible to remove without bringing everything down. The cruel irony that history placed at the end of Rock Hudson's story is this. He spent 34 years performing heterosexuality for an America that he feared would reject him if it knew the truth. When the truth came out in the worst possible way, at the worst possible moment, what happened was not what he had feared. The American public did not uniformly reject him. Many of them grieved him. Many of them reconsidered what they thought they knew about the disease that was killing people in their cities. Many of them called their congressmen. The year after Rock Hudson died, federal funding for AIDS research increased by a factor of 10. His death did more for AIDS awareness and research funding than 3 years of activism had managed to achieve. He had spent his entire life hiding himself to protect an image. The one moment he could not hide changed the world. Roy Scherer never got to know that. He was already gone. There is a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 6933 Hollywood Boulevard. It has the name Rock Hudson on it. Not Roy Scherer. Rock Hudson. The character. The construction. The lie that Henry Willson built in 1948 and that the studio system maintained for 30 years, and that Roy Scherer performed every day of his professional life until the day he could not perform anymore. The real man is not on the Walk of Fame. The real man is in the history of AIDS research funding, in the legislation that followed his death, in the faces of the people who are alive today because a dying actor in a Paris hotel room could not keep the secret one more day. Roy Scherer saved more lives by dying honestly than Rock Hudson ever saved by living a lie. Hollywood just never figured out how to put that on a star. Did you know the real story of Rock Hudson before today? Tell me in the comments what you think the studio system cost him.